Hi, I'm Nathan Hopkins, and for my comics history presentation, I decided that I wanted to talk about Romanticism of the Silver Age of Comics. Now, some of you might be wondering right now about what exactly Romanticism is. You probably learned about it in high school English, but for some of you, high school may have been a while ago, or you just may not really remember a lot of the stuff you learned in high school English. I know I don't remember everything I learned in high school. But anyway, Romanticism was and is basically a literary, musical, and intellectual movement that began in the late 1700s. And it placed a large emphasis on emotion and being an individual while glorifying the past and nature. These are good examples of romantic artwork. They show nature in a particularly idealized way. We have a nice background here, just nice scenery, a nice cloudy, cliffy landscape, a couple in a sunset, and what appears to be a birth, some sort of like mythical birth. To be honest, I don't know if this is exactly what it is, but I see this to be as the birth of Aphrodite from Greek mythology. That's how I interpret that. And the primary importance of Romanticism was the artist expressing their personal feelings, whether those personal feelings are about a tree or a sunset or about themselves. That was what the big focus was on. And that also created the term romanticized. Basically, if something's romanticized, it's just a particularly idealized fantasy version of some sort of place, event, or person. Like, for example, this right here, George Washington crossing the Delaware. This is a very romanticized portrayal of it because it was in the middle of winter when he did that. It was in the middle of the night, and him and his soldiers were all cold, sick, and unhappy. This is not what it looked like. It did not look nearly this nice, but the artists wanted to represent it that way, and that was just their personal interpretation. And personally, I think this is a much better piece of artwork than watching a bunch of sick, unhappy guys freezing while crossing a river in a boat. Anyway, American Romanticism in particular focused on heroic simplicity, extensive descriptions of nature, as with traditional Romanticism, and new and strange lands. Around the time Romanticism reached America, America was starting to kind of expand westward, and all of that land was just brand new to them, and they interpreted it as being really good, and that was just where dreams are going to be made. We're all gonna travel west and have great new lives. So that was a big basis of new literature, just the unknown. And any sort of poems you've seen that describe something like a tree or a sunset, things like that, just lawn poems, those are romanticized. Those are romantic literature. That's a good example of that, of things that I've read. And romantic literature differed from earlier works because it spoke to a wider audience, as self-reflection and nature are things everyone has experienced. Everyone has seen things like a landscape and hills, and everyone has thought about themselves, how they can improve, what they've done, what they should do, their goals. Everyone has done stuff like that. Anyway, what was the Silver Age of comics? Well, the Silver Age of comics was an era in comics that everyone can agree lasted throughout the 1960s. Some say it began in the mid-50s when Fantastic Four was created, but that's just a little discrepancy in there. And there were two basic types of Silver Age comics. Most of them were either the hero solving problems through logic and creative improvisation, or heroes fighting supervillains and their inner demons. I'd say the Flash and Thor kind of are a mix of both. The Flash is he's connected to science. So he uses logic and problem solving, and of course he improvises as well. And then Thor, heavy improvisation. A lot of the time he just kind of goes in there and starts fighting and just improvises and does what he thinks is best at the any given moment. And a big part of the Silver Age of comics was realism and consistent characterization weren't exactly high priorities. People may act differently, a bit differently from issue to issue, so there wasn't continuity and consistency wasn't exactly strong during the Silver Age of comics. And the really big part of Silver Age of comics was that it sort of gave birth to the idea of comic books having really unrealistic science behind them, such as X-Men, Fantastic Four, The Flash, and Spider-Man. All of those heroes are kind of based around science, got their powers through sort of scientific means, connected to science somehow through their jobs, maybe. Like the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards is a scientist. I'd say the Flash is a scientist. Spider-Man clearly knows a lot about science. And in the X-Men, there is some sort of science about like the mutant genes, and they do talk about that. Now, Silver Age comics nowadays are kind of considered silly and wacky nowadays due to things like unreliable covers, not as threatening villains, plots that were kind of flimsy and unbelievable, and some silly names. Like, to be honest, The Flash isn't exactly a real intimidating name. It's kind of silly, and there were just like unusual covers and artwork, like this right here. The Flash just kind of has a goofy expression on his face, and over here, this Fantastic Four issue has a crazy creature on it. And getting back to silly names, there were some really silly names, especially in villains, because villains then, a lot of the time, were just kind of more silly with their motivations and personalities. One villain in particular that I know about, who just makes me laugh every time I say his name, Kite Man. A Batman villain based off of Charlie Brown. Yes, Kite Man exists, and yes, he's still around today. Oh, back on topic, how exactly do Romanticism and the Silver Age of comics relate to each other? Well, the big relation between the two of them is the concept of a Byronic hero. A Byronic hero is basically just a main character notable for being kind of withdrawn, emotional, maybe shut in, but they do have a rich inner life and a softer side that only a few people really truly realize. This character, even though they're called a Byronic hero, they aren't an ideal hero at all. They're not even always a hero. This character can be an anti-hero, like Anakin Skywalker, for instance. Well, Anakin Skywalker for most of the prequel trilogy. An anti-villain, I kind of interpret Professor Snape from Harry Potter to be a bit of an anti-villain. Or maybe they're just a straight-up villain, and not a hero at all, don't have heroic qualities, like Kylo Ren, for example. He's definitely a Byronic hero who happens to be a villain. And the Byronic hero, like Romanticism in general, is very emotional. They're really emotionally sensitive, so they might end up being moody or emotionally conflicted. And they also want to do what's right, even if it's contrary to society. These characters are willing to break laws or regulations or what's expected out of them to achieve their desired goal or to do what they think is right. Another big relation between the Silver Age of comics and Romanticism were explanations kind of relating to nature. Before the Silver Age of comics, a lot of superheroes sort of gained their powers through scientific means. Like, for instance, Captain America. He gained his abilities through the super serum in a lab. Well, even though a lot of the heroes in the Silver Age did get their powers through scientific means, sort of, like, the Flash did sort of get his through scientific means, but if I remember correctly, it was because he was struck by lightning, for instance. In Spider-Man, it was sort of science, but it was a spider, which is kind of natural means and not things intentionally given to him. A radioactive spider kind of bridges the gap there between natural and scientific. But yeah, and things out of nature, sort of, even like Thor, things were also sort of related to the supernatural and sort of magic and gods. Thor's a big example of that. Thor is obviously based off of the Thor from Norse mythology, who is a god with his supernatural godly powers. That didn't come to be by science. Anyway, the big way that Romanticism in the Silver Age of comics influenced the future is that the idea of a Byronic hero became popularized. There are a lot of Byronic heroes around nowadays. Like, as I said before, Anakin Skywalker is a great example. And you could say Kylo Ren is one too, and Wolverine, and Katniss even. All of these characters are emotional. They don't necessarily follow the rules if they were to reach their goal. They're all pretty conflicted. Additionally, Romanticism in the Silver Age of comics influenced the future because it sort of put less of a focus on science fiction and it made more movies focused on magic or gods or supernatural forces that are in universe. Like things like this, like Star Wars, X-Men, Harry Potter, Hunger Games. Big movie and sometimes book franchises that are all about just kind of natural things in nature, even if they're not natural to us. So I think that's about all I have for you today. If you have any questions or comments, please reply to the post on Canvas. You can reply to me with questions there, or you can just put some questions or comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. I'll be sure to keep it open. Thanks for watching my video.